Answer.
61 and partly cloudy at O'Hare. Your next news update, 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
"48 days till the election. Tick-tock goes the clock, and all eyes are on those swing states, in particular Pennsylvania. And Senator John Fetterman came forward and said that Pennsylvania voters, they have a special place in their heart for Trump.
I know some people that are like, I personally think he's a terrible person, or I'm appalled by some of these things, but I fundamentally think that, I'll still vote for him. And I think a lot of Republicans already agree with that. And I never agreed with our approach talking about that he's a convicted felon. I mean, I thought Democrats, we were the party that was all about second chances, and that we're not going to condemn somebody based on mistakes or things in that kind of situation. And I was convinced too that those kinds of trials and that kinds of thing, it's not going to have any impact on that. It's like, what's left? He's been impeached twice. Now it's been 2 attempted assassinations, one where a bullet actually hit him. And at this point, and I also want people to understand, and it's not science, but there's energy and there's kinds of anger on the ground in Pennsylvania, and people are very committed. And Trump is going to be strong, and that's we have to respect that. Can't even understand it, and it's not like a science that can explain it, but you have to just know that it's real.
Wow, and he was speaking at a forum over the weekend, The Atlantic.
Yeah.
Not a right-wing
He sounds great.
Publication, by the way, that held this forum. And he's getting better. He's getting stronger. His speech is returning.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Remember, he had a lot of long pauses. Man, I mean, he sounds...
When he ran for office, that was a disaster.
Yeah.
But
I'm glad to hear.
A million people had already early voted before that debate with Dr. Oz.
Right. But I'm glad to hear he's doing better, though.
Oh, yeah.
No matter what.
As the Christians in us.
Yeah.
Right. But, I mean, he makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, he does.
Will it work in the ballot box? For more on that, let's welcome to the program Oliver Bateman, historian and journalist based in Pittsburgh. He blogs, he vlogs, and he podcasts at his Substack.
Jeez.
Oliver Bateman does the work. And his latest column is The Pittsburgh Paradox Could Hand PA to Trump. Good morning, Mr. Bateman. How are you?
Hi, Amy. Hi, Dan. Glad to be back on this show. I was on here once before, so I am glad to be here again. And yeah, John Fetterman, coming back from the stroke, really laid it out there for folks, whether they want to hear it or not, as far as the Trump situation goes.
Well, is there a special place in Pennsylvania people's hearts because of the assassination attempt?
I mean, that was only about 30 minutes north of where I am in Pittsburgh, there in Butler County. I think that he represents, like Fetterman says, whether you like him or not, he represents an alternative. And I think particularly in a lot of the places where there've been, this is a traditional union labor state, although it has elected a lot of Republicans, there are people who realize that years of not very competitive elections have not been delivering the goods. And we're talking about Trump being a felon, they're talking about Trump, being some kind of existential evil or something like that. They're not going to be moved by those appeals come election day.
Well, let's talk about Pittsburgh in particular. It used to be transformed from a Rust Belt to a progressive tech stronghold. How has that changed the makeup of voters in that city?
Well, I mean, there's certainly fewer of them in the city proper. I mean, if you look at the population, it's now like smaller than Arlington, Texas, which is just a giant suburb sitting between Dallas and Fort Worth. The county itself is still large, but is also, experiencing slight declines. People have left. The people who have come in are often, these sort of carpetbagger tech workers or med workers who may not even, bring kids into the district. It's a pretty amazing thing. To give you one really great example, and it's happening here, this district, the Pittsburgh Public Schools district, is going to be closing 16 schools. I can't say that often enough. Pre-COVID, 40,000 students.
Wow.
COVID closures happen. Parents, whether they're liberal, progressive, whatever, say, I've had enough of this. My kids have to go and get that in-person education that we now know is so very important, which we knew all along was so very important. The district drops to like 19,000 kids. So these 16 closures, including one right up the block from my house, are a real wake-up call, or should be a real wake-up call to what is happening in the city.
Yeah, because I remember COVID, you guys were really, your governor came out swinging. I remember he would not allow golfing and alcohol sales. Remember that?
Yeah, and the school closures persisted.
Yeah.
He did. Yeah, I mean, so many of the COVID rules changed like day to day, right? Or week to week, like, 6 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet, whatever, 3 shots, 9 shots, whatever, all those different things that were hard to keep up with. But most importantly, for parents here, their little ones were either at home or they had to figure out how to make their in-person jobs work while kids were at home. And, this persisted for like 2 years.
Wow. Scott Pressler, he basically moved to Pennsylvania to work on the voter registrations and making counties clean up their voter rolls. How important I don't know if you know who he is, but how important is that work? Because I've seen some counties that were really deep blue. He's actually registered more Republicans in those counties now. How important is that work there in Pennsylvania?
Well, I don't know Scott, but I do know the numbers, which are, show a significant uptick in the years following 2020. And now, really like almost getting to one-to-one registrations in the state between Republicans and Democrats. I mean, Republicans have made major inroads. And I mean, just south of here, to give a good example, Washington County, my home county, was long a Democrat stronghold in the 80s and 90s. By from the 2010s on, that becomes a Republican area. Like it turns over, and it goes from one party to the other party without any real competitive elections between them, because 50 years, 60 years of non-competitive elections, voter apathy, changing registrations, and people electing the alternative flipped it. And where Washington County went, like it deindustrialized before Pittsburgh, it lost population before Pittsburgh, is probably a lesson for where Pittsburgh could be headed. Wow. It looks like, right, if you look at the 2023 special election here in Allegheny County, where we had a Republican win, although he had been a Democrat before, win the DA spot. People were fed up with crime, fed up with some of the homelessness situation here. And you had a county executive who was a Republican who had strong financial backing, to be sure. He almost comes within 10,000 votes out of 360,000 cast of winning that election. I mean, that against a woman who had said, she grew up in an area where, while she liked the people around her, the white working class people around her were racist. That was a remark she had made years earlier in her career. She barely won that election as county executive. It's close. This city is much closer than people think. Some of the local elections are still not competitive, right? Because nobody else runs or they're blowouts. But those were two races where money was put in. The candidates were competitive. And that exactly what Fetterman is saying in that clip you played. That's a great clip. Came to play here. I mean, I'm just looking at road signs, and that's, it's not scientific, around my neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And you can see that the motivation is always on the right. In 2016, it was definitely on the right. And now, it definitely, if you're just counting signs in a north side of Pittsburgh neighborhood, you would, which is probably the most Republican part of the city, I would guess, you'll see a lot more Republican signs.
And they don't get torn down. Interesting. Or taken down or stolen. So, excuse my ignorance, in 2020, who won in Pennsylvania in 2020?
In 2020, that state went to Biden. I mean, that was a nail biter that went to Biden. I went to Biden on the night of. It looked like it was going to open as a strong win for Trump, but that was the year of the COVID vote. and those mail-in ballots came in really strongly Democrat. That's not going to happen this time around.
Yeah, my friend Representative Mike Piskaric was in the House, and when they tried to basically change the election, they actually introduced legislation. Him and Mastriano, whatever his name is.
Yeah, the guy that ran for governor.
Yeah, in the Senate, and he literally lost his election because he tried to defend the election integrity in Pennsylvania. So it's just insane what's happening across the country as people who are trying to protect election integrity.
But do people in Pennsylvania actually believe Kamala Harris, after saying for years she wants to ban fracking, that she's not going to ban fracking when she gets into office?
I think there's still, a lot of people here are still learning who she is, right? David McCormick has released a really effective ad in that Senate race. I don't know if it's going to be enough to beat Bob Casey. I've written about Bob Casey Jr. He's a very popular senator, but the ad just ties him to Kamala and her changing views over the years. Like, it just plays a clip of all the things she said prior to getting the nomination. And it should, at least let voters know this is somebody who's not a law, if she's in favor of fracking now or other things, yes, you can change your mind, but certainly it seems like a lot of, there've been a lot of convenient policy shifts in the past couple years at a minimum.
Wow.
All right. Well, anything you're working on that you want to promote, Oliver Bateman?
People should keep an eye. I have in the past year really started covering Pennsylvania heavily for Real Clear Politics. That's where this piece that you guys stumbled across came from. So I am going to have a lot more stuff in the lead up to the election, probably because it's such a critical state, definitely because it's such a critical state. So people wanting to read that can go check it out.
Okay. Oliver Bateman, historian, journalist based in Pittsburgh. I have to say it again, that you vlog. Yes. And you have podcasts at your Substack. Oliver Bateman does the work. Mr. Bateman, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll have you back soon.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great to be on. Take care.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
When was the last time your financial advisor looked at your tax return? The